parts of your life that is more or less of an issue of being a woman in communications. It is a very female-dominated field. So I think that is something that when I hire and have a stack of resumes in front of me, I would say 80% of them, and I'm in public relations, primarily communications marketing, 70% of them are women. And so that it is interesting in a candidate pool of all women, looking at them and looking at your candidates and saying, how do they stand out from one another? If you have, with an increasing emphasis on diversity in your workforce, in your field, when you have a team of eight women communicators, I always think, well, it would be great to have a male voice in this team somewhere. So anyway, I don't always think of myself as a woman in communications. I think of myself as a communications professional. From a technical standpoint, anything anybody says about writing that you hear on this panel is true times 20. I mean, it is amazing how few people this day and age can really write well. So in standing out in writing short form, long form, all sorts of, be a versatile, high volume writer is the greatest skill that any candidate that I think I look at, or any professional I work with, in terms, it's so important, it really matters to me. And so much work writing now is short form. Don't sell yourself short on that in terms of when candidates want, or when employers want writing samples, show them that you can write the 140 characters, but you can also write, the long form feature article. It's still equally important to have all of that, that skill set. Oops.
Okay. What she said, and what she said, and then I'll add a couple others. When you're asked the question, why do you want to work in communications or marketing communications or public relations, the wrong answer is because I like people. Just don't use that cliche. And the other thing, in terms of writing and knowing your audience, is respect what your editors do. They are in that position. I can remember when Helen Thomas, who some of you may recall, was a well-known reporter for United Press International, a White House correspondent. She spoke at a symposium years ago, and the topic of social media was just coming up, and blogging, and she was a little critical of it, probably hypercritical, and she made the comment, well, they don't have editors. And that was really the early days of fact-checking and adhering to style books and such. Some of that is still relevant. And the last point I'd make, and not just female-specific, but we're social creatures, and while we use all the social platforms, face-to-face still matters, and eye contact still matters. And I know very often when you're used to the digital format, it's really hard to make that eye-to-eye contact, and I think that's still important.
And the next question, Sue and Mary Grayson now, Sherry kind of touched on, and it's the most important technical skill. So, Joan, what would you say is the most important technical skill for a woman in comm?
Actually, I don't have an opinion.
All right. Well, what about the most important character trait? I know each of you kind of say stand out or diversify yourself. That's at least what Mary Grace said. And so how do we kind of do that as women entering the comm world? Make ourselves stand out as much as possible.
Should I answer? Oh,
yeah,
sure.
go ahead. Don't mind again.
Well, I think the most important character trait, there's a couple. My very first statement, be honest, be truthful, be reliable, show up, and also express your opinions. It's fascinating to me today to hear that there are so many women in communications, because I graduated from the speech department, even though the program was communications. So in my classes, there were all men, 2 women maybe. The whole communication thing was controlled by men. Now it's completely shifted over. So, which in one way is not good, because as we all know, wages for men are more than wages for women. So that's something you're going to have to think about. And also, truthfully, just showing up being there, being interested, being curious, all these little personality traits that you need to work on. Should work on.
What comes to mind in terms of the trait that's useful outside of the technical skills of writing is resourcefulness, because there is so, there are a few things that we write about that haven't been written by somebody at some point before, or there are a few problems that you'll encounter that haven't been encountered by another company or another organization. And with this wonderful internet thing, you can go out and learn so much about how other people tackle things. And I work at a community foundation, I work in philanthropy. There are 700 other organizations across the country that do what I do. 700 people who have similar jobs to me. And so I can network with them, I can go to their website, I can do all sorts of things so that when I go to solve a problem, I already have a really good background of what's going on out there. So there's really no reason to say, I don't know, because there are so many ways to find out things. Similarly, so many ways to find out about people you're meeting with. LinkedIn, Facebook, when I interview somebody, I really expect that they have already gone to all those resources about me, figured out so they can say, hey, I see that you like running. I'm a runner too, whatever. Show that you have initiative and you use all those resources out there, because it's free, and it just takes effort. And if you demonstrate effort and hard work and I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to find this, that perseverance and problem solving is so much of what communications is about. So I think resourcefulness is something I have always tried to be, and something I look for in the people that I work with. How do I solve this problem? I'm not on my own. I got a lot of resources out there to help me, whether it's people, books, internet, whatever. But there's no excuse for saying I don't know how I'm going to do that. You can figure it out.
And I would encourage you to be lifelong learners. Be curious and let your coworkers, your colleagues, your friends, your family, in my case, clients, I'm a sole proprietor, and I have learned so much from my clients and from opportunities through professional associations, and I'll give you a couple of examples. I was hired, before I started my own business, one of my jobs was as marketing director for a large real estate brokerage. I knew nothing about the real estate industry. And so I thought, well, I'll go through the drill to get a real estate broker's, salesperson's license. I had no desire to be a real estate salesperson, but it gave me the foundation, the legal knowledge, the jargon, and so forth. Another client-driven curiosity was golf, and women should take advantage of golf. It's where a lot of business gets conducted. If any of you are going to be at Kooks First, come by. I'll have a booth, 515. Come by there, and I can talk to you more about that. But again, I took golf lessons. I subscribed to golf publications just so I could get that foundation of knowledge. And then the last point I want to make on kind of the female factor, or how we can distinguish ourselves, is we're empathetic beings, and I not to the exclusion of the men in the audience, but women do tend to be more empathetic, and it can be reflected in your writing and in your speaking, and use that voice.
I've seen a lot of students. I managed the internship program at the University of Idaho's Comm School for a while. And what I watched for before I even allowed an intern to leave that university for a position, especially as an intern, is what other things have they done for others? You can write down on your resume that you're the vice president for Invisible Children. What did you do? What kind of a program did you manage for that? You did a lot of communication skill if you put on any kind of an information project, a small symposium for that organization. Now, a lot of people might not know it, but if you've done it, you're turning right around and talking about it. I picked Invisible Children because I didn't even know anything about it until asked to help. marvelous program, marvelous program. But this do for others, get involved. I know at WSU there are plenty of ways to get involved in the community. If you ever need help with that, of course you let me know. And they expect that our students come to them ready to do. That's arrive on time, arrive at all of the meetings. Yes, just do more. I have to laugh when it's some of the sports that you could get involved in. Even when I was in school, I thought to myself, I better learn to golf and I better learn to play tennis, because that was things that people could do with their clients or with important people. And then I also took scuba. Okay, I nearly drowned in scuba. So don't take scuba unless you really like to swim. There, you don't meet too many people, just fish. So have a go. But the golf and the tennis was fun to learn to do. I could never give up that kind of time. And so that's where I think we all need to give you advice on. I spent every moment that I should have, or I believed I should have, working. How many of you are from small towns? Do you think you are? Okay, you are already ready for a lot of communication skills because you have watched your P's and Q's from the day you were born. You know, somebody next door is going to tell your mom where you were at 5 o'clock that afternoon. You know, you weren't cooking. So, but the rest of you will have to either be careful or think about your reputation. And that is in the idea of hard work and so on. I believe I may have overdone it a little bit, but you all will be able to figure out a balance for those kinds of things. But get out there right now and do, and then be proud of what you did. Write it down so you don't forget.
All right. Well, the majority of everyone in this room, we're all college students, most of us are. Some of us are seniors throughout the entire year. So some kind of advice when are thinking about your college education, what would you guys do differently if you were kind of back at WSU?
Well, I feel today, I graduated from here in 1956, married a graduate student, left in 1959, went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, then we spent 6 years in Winnipeg at a university, and then Bakersfield, and then Phoenix. So I can't believe the resources and the things that are available to all of you today. So much help. It amazes me. But also, my career was really not anything at all like the rest of these ladies because I spent it in volunteering and organizing. Phoenix has a series of villages, and I became chairman of the North Mountain Village Planning Committee for 15 years. Out of that grew a community association, which is still functioning 26 years later. I've organized my neighborhood. We have irrigation. This spring, I spent about 35 hours just organizing all 38 people, emails, met everybody in my neighborhood that I did not know. And so now we can react when something happens. So I think it's important to, besides your career, look outside your career and think of what you can do in your community, even if you start out small, because you are going to meet people, and meeting people is very important. Contacts. And also, every occupation has a niche. And when I get into these occupations that I've never even thought of, I'm always amazed at how important these little niches are and the difference in how people don't understand exactly what this person really does. So I don't know if that'll be an inspiration to you or not, but I hope you will think about it.
I don't think my career was anywhere near like these ladies because our families, my husband's and my families, went to Washington State University. So it was kind of a natural to come here. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college and to even attend. So picking WSU was valuable. I then had a lot of family members here at the same time. But I will say, because I went to WSU and I was in the school, no, what would that be, Department of Communication, think back, at the time, and I thought it would be really cool to go into broadcasting. I thought that would just be neat. And a lot of the courses, are the same at the beginning and so on. Well, I got to the second level of broadcasting course and ran into that first wall. I wouldn't even particularly say I could see through it, because what I was missing, maybe besides at that time really good looks, but again, I thought possibly we could get around that part of it, maybe hide behind something. But the thing was, I didn't have that voice. And I tell you what, at that time, you could tell the men, there was only one other woman, but the men in that group had that voice. I swear it's because of surgery, but, I don't know. I wasn't willing to take the B's and the C's that I felt were going to be given to me, because I didn't have as strong as opinion voice as I might have now. So I backed out and went to journalism, who was welcoming. That group of individuals here welcomed everyone. And so I got to try out everything. Internship right away as on the Daily Evergreen. They only let 2 freshmen be on the staff. So it was a real competition right off the bat to get to work for the Evergreen. So I do have a hard time thinking that people don't want to work for something, because in my stage of the game, you had to earn it. And it wasn't because of being a woman. It was earning that spot that you were going to try hard as a journalist. Well, internship got me to university relations, which then became my job. I only had one woman involved, and she was really a outgoing sort of person, and the men there, it was fine. But what they did was send us into the community. So it was things like United Way, American Heart Association, Pullman Education Foundation. I could help on behalf of the university to work with those people. And while I didn't use university supplies, they did get me and as much time as I could give them. It was just, that leads back to that do for others. I luckily was sent out there to do it. Then, I saw a gift. This was great. I was working for the News Bureau when the students took over French Ad during our time of crisis. And that was pretty good, because then I watched and took notes as my husband and brother-in-law are in part of the strike, so I could be on one side, they could be on the other. But I even had a chance to edit a newspaper. I was sent down to Dayton, Washington, to put out their newspaper one day. The same day that the Kiwanis were finishing up getting all of the students ready to go on a trip to Japan. They had 2 open seats. My husband and I found the money, and we went to Japan for 10 days with Dayton, Washington. We just pieced together really fun. We didn't want to leave Pullman, I will admit, or the Palouse. Pullman is where we decided to stay, because every year we could do something different. My husband was head track coach at Pullman High School, and he did that from 3 o'clock on every day. Went to work early in the morning for chemistry and left in the afternoon. It's all of 5 minutes to get to anywhere in Pullman, except for a certain time of day, but we won't worry about that. But it was just trying out different things. I didn't leave the area, and so I was able to build a reputation just by helping other groups. So I think you could do both, but I do hope you'll work really, really hard on trying out new things, trying out especially the ability to walk up to somebody and talk to them for a minute or two. It might drive the other person crazy, but you're gonna be able to do it, because I'm pretty sure any of us could do it to you with 5 questions. Because I'm gonna start as what's your hometown. 10 to 1, I have had somebody, if you're from the state of Washington. If not, I've flown through it. I've loved, we will be able to have a conversation that you would enjoy after about 4 questions, I'm pretty sure. But enjoy people. You don't have to take a job because you like people, but at least enjoy being with them.
Great.
I wanted to make sure I remember the question. There was something about what would I have done differently in college?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
That I want to talk about in front of this large group of people. So true confessions, and I'm sure there are people in the room who would agree to this. One of the driving forces for me in going into communications was that I would not have to take a math course.
Yes.
So yes. I remember, if you look at it, I knew that there were elements of this field that appealed to me, and as I began to look through the requirements, I was like, God, I can get through 4 years without all over this. So I majored in communications, minored in political science, and went to work in banking. All about money, and now I work in philanthropy, which is all about money. And I realized probably about 4 or 5 years into working in banking that lack of business knowledge was actually a bigger challenge for me than I expected it would be, because I was writing about money all the time. And I was able to pick up that fairly quickly, working so much and working on annual reports and having to write about balance sheets and income statements and all that. But I realized that, that was probably going to be a problem long term. So I did my employer paid for me to do an executive graduate program at Syracuse University, which is also a very great communication school. And it was a 2-year program that was distance learning. So we went to New York, we went to Syracuse and spent a week sort of learning what we were going to learn. And then we went back and we did independent study and, email chats and that sort of thing. But we took the same course load as you took if I had been living in Syracuse and I was a graduate student. Everything was the same. There were 30 of us. I was actually in the first class, and there were people from all over the country. But it was a blend of the Newhouse School of Communications, the Maxwell School of Public Affairs, and the business school. So it was this great blend of all of those things, but I had to take the accounting class, and I had to take the finance class, and I had to, and worst of all, I had to take it, and my husband got me through it. He was an accountant, or he is an accountant. But I had to do over again, that being the root of the question. I would have probably gotten over my math phobia a little earlier in my life and realized, and taken those classes. I think that has made a big difference in sort of that ability to accelerate and grow up in my career, was that I had more business background than I had sort of going into it. So,
Boy, trip down memory lane. I too had an aversion to the whole math side, but I also had this vision of someday owning my own business. And I knew when I left WSU, I was in the liberal arts track and really didn't have a very solid business foundation. So 10 years after graduating, I went back to graduate school and have an MBA from Seattle University. And I will say that the one class that I probably struggled with the most was statistics. And I am the stat queen now. I do a monthly news release for the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, and it is all about statistics, so I have to make them user-friendly. So, but I was a very serious student when I was here, and I finished in 3.5 years, so I didn't have a lot of time for extracurricular activities, and that's probably my one regret. I worked a little bit on the Evergreen and the Chinook as kind of extension of the coursework. So I would somehow find a way to balance, and that's not to say we didn't hitchhike to Idaho on the weekends, but find some, don't they still?
we didn't have Uber and Lyft then. You were on your own.
Yeah, we didn't have cars back then. We had cars. I didn't have a car. But how many of you are involved in either the Women in Communications or the PRSSA? Good. Take advantage of, find a way to do something a little extracurricular. You'll form lifelong friends. And I think Mary Grace and I met through PRSA.
yeah.
And how many decades ago was that? It was a long, long time. And the professional associations, whether at the student level or next, I think are very important. And they're also a way for you to give back. And I think without exception, everyone on this panel has talked about ways to use your skills for the greater good.
All right, I'm going to use one of my questions so I don't dig into audience question time, but how would each of you define work-life balance? Because when I'm going on informational interviews, companies tell me that they have great work-life balance, and I'm not even quite sure what that means, and yeah, basically what has that look like for each of you?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because it's not true that you can have everything. If you are a working woman and you're advancing in your career, I feel you're going to have to give up something. It is extreme, unless you can exist on about 2 hours sleep a night, which I don't think is possible. But I think organization is one thing you do. I mean, like, you think about how you're going to do your dinners. If you want to have a family, you have to be prepared to make some sacrifices. Either that, or you have to get a husband that you can train to do the dishes. Or possibly find a husband who's a foodie who wants to cook. And then you can do grocery delivery. But in the meantime, think about what you're having for dinner 2 days before the dinner is going to happen. I happen to be an extremely organized person, although I also have a really bad section of putting off things until the last minute. I'm a great hurry up and do it. But it's very difficult, because in today's world also we have the fear factor. When my kids were growing up, they walked to school, they bicycled to school. Today in my neighborhood, people drive their kids to school. This is a time factor. Who has the time actually to do this? I'm surprised these women don't rebel, because you get in the car, there's little pickets, you drive in, and actually there's a woman standing here, maybe a man, who opens the door for your kids, so you don't even have to do that. You drive your kids to sports, and then, of course, everyone has to do sports, and the kids have so many involvements. So there's a lot of time, people wanting your time. So I think, to save your sanity, unless you're in a job where you can afford to hire help, so they'll be driving the kids, you have to make choices of what is really important, and then you communicate those choices to your kids. You either say, we don't have the money, or it's my money, I'm not spending it on you. You just have to take charge of this family, or it's going to run you into the ground.
Boy, am I glad I live in a small town. I want to stay away from the big town. I want public education, maybe unlike our Secretary of Education. I wasn't
Yes.
going to say that. I was going to stay out of that. I'm sorry. I really feel I tried to have everything, but I also feel I came darn close to doing it. So I'm not saying that you need to, but it certainly takes an environment for you to get to do what you consider everything. I mean, that might be different than what I considered everything. Because remember, I had a lot of a tradition. You maybe have broken free from some of these problem traditions, like having your children, although I sometimes think I did have to have my children while I was young. I can hardly handle the grandchildren now. I am exhausted. So, but we did. We had 2 children. I worked full time. I broke my arm and a leg on a Friday, and yet got my weekly publication out that next Wednesday. I got hit with a softball and lost my vision for a short period of time. But it just all seemed to work out. I will say, you pick your partner carefully so that there's a 50-50 share. And if you're lucky, maybe it's a 40-60 them share. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to be ahead on it, but that's going to make life so much easier when 2 individuals are responsible for the family unit, or for the unit. But I'd say, give it a try. I can list everything that I've done. In fact, I was president of Women in Communications here, too. I have to look at my resume, which I had put together with those kinds of things, because you forget once in a while, and we did some great things. And in fact, the way to work into it, I ran into my advisor on a bus in Honolulu 25 years later. And of course, we recognized each other, but still, it's what you can do in, those kinds of things. But well, like I'm going to go back to, try one activity away from the office and your family. Be careful. I know it'll be difficult for you, but if you want it, it won't be difficult. If you think you have to have it, it'll be really difficult. Don't have it. Don't listen to mom. She can wait to be a grandparent a lot longer. Or she can move in with you, which I would say don't do that. But I give it some kind of a try. One extra thing that you'll really help with. You all have a bigger problem than I do. You see that little device? Pick up your phone. I was going to bring my old one and smash it right in front of you. That doesn't give you any kind of freedom. Now the tutorial part I love, but it sets you as, no matter where you are, the office can find you. Well, and your friends can find you too. But later on, it's the office that'll find you, or your clients that'll find you. So it's not as friendly of a ring as it might be now, or a zap if you're getting your texts and so on. Just remember, you're never out of sight. At least when I went home from the office, I did have a typewriter, and until I broke my arm and leg at this university, it was a manual typewriter. I swear I'd still be on manual typewriters today, except I broke my arm and leg and had to have an electric typewriter. But we went home, and we could get things organized, but usually you couldn't keep working on that same stage unless you went back to the office. And even in Pullman, you didn't want to do that a lot. So you're stuck with a 24-hour-a-day job if you do it. But now maybe your 24 hours can mingle in some other activities that will build you. And remember sport, very, very important. I took up the hammer when I was 45, and I still enjoy throwing it today. That's not a hammer that you build things with, it's a device, it's a sports device, but do have a little fun, but maybe it won't be at the normal time.
So I probably am in I think the worst years of the worst work-life balance thing. I work full-time, I have 3 kids, and so that is why when I had the opportunity to come to Pullman and spend a night in the Residence Inn by myself, I could not have been more overjoyed to come. And I turned on the TV, I sat in my jammies for 5 hours last night. I was so happy. So I think it is an ever-present challenge for everybody. And people talk about can you have it all those very deep questions. I think it's just a matter of, it doesn't all happen at the same time. I worked full-time. I had my kids when I was 30, 32, and 39. I worked part-time for 12 years, and then I went back full-time a couple years ago. And I think it really comes back to the idea of the ability to have that flexibility at different times in your life comes back to the reputation you build your first years out of school. So in that first job, defining who I was and what kind of work I did has paid off in every subsequent job because I had that reputation. I think I always explain to communications to people that communications is a risk management job. It's what do I need to do? How am I managing this organization or my CEOs or this product or this program's risk, either to further it or to further sales or to prevent loss. It's all about risk. And so I always looked at my own career that way in managing the risk of what I wanted to do. Would I be able to do it in the future or not? So I think the reputation, it does always come back to sort of who you are, what's the quality of your work, what's the ethic you demonstrate. Are you somebody who's fun to work with? Are you somebody who says thank you? Are you somebody who gives credit to the people who work around you, which I think is one of the biggest things that we always have to remember is nothing that we do alone. We always do it in partnership with the people who work around us. And I think that is something that is lacking, I think, more in the workplace now than it was when I started, was the ability to not take credit, but to share accolades with everybody else around you. So I think the business we're in, both personally and organizationally is about risk management around reputation. And I think if you build a good reputation on good, solid work, making a difference for the organizations you work for, will allow you greater flexibility in what you do and flexibility in how you manage your career. I think that you're totally right about this whole phone thing. It does create the fact that there is absolutely no boundaries whatsoever. And it's a really an ongoing challenge. I mean, I was driving over here from Seattle and I was just listening to it, tone every time I got an email message. And you're like, oh my God, when do I turn this off? So I'm going to go on vacation in a couple weeks for spring break, and I'm telling everybody, no, I'm not going to answer it. So it's a big discipline thing there. It's because you can set boundaries yourself. And I think sometimes we don't set the boundaries that we should. So I'm going to Mexico, and I'm not going to answer any emails.
Well, I confess, I'm a workaholic, and I think I'm hearing that from others up here, and probably some of you are too, whether it's related to your coursework or others. I also have lousy refusal skills.
Yes, I know.
And particularly if it has a WSU attached to it, I usually say yes. Right, Bruce? But the joy is you can blend your passions. You can schedule your pleasures. And at 5 o'clock on Mondays, starting in 3 weeks, I check out of the office and I go play golf with women. And then we go into the clubhouse afterwards and we debrief over a glass of wine and dinner. And if not for that being an appointment on my calendar, and it's kind of sad that you have to schedule relaxation, but I would be in my office. So take time for yourself. And I wear a Fitbit. I like walking. I'm pretty diligent about trying to get my 10,000 steps, whether it's walking or going on a hike or something else. And again, it's a device that's a reminder, but whatever works for you, find it and take risks. Try something new.
All right. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to open it up to the floor. But before then, again, I want to thank every single one of you for coming today. It was so wonderful hearing from each of you. So, raise hands. I can call on you. I'm not sure how it all works, but go ahead, Emma.
What are some specific challenges that you guys in your respective careers have encountered because you work with?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. It was
In your respective
Microphone.
careers, what are some specific challenges that you guys have encountered, like specifically because you work with women?
Well, one thing that I think is really important is I've done a lot of public speaking for these volunteer things that I've done. And sometimes things come up. And if you have made a mistake or someone's accusing you of doing something wrong and it happened, say, I made a mistake. I did something, I wouldn't do it again, but I did make a mistake. That ends it because you've come out in the open and you've said, okay, you're right, I made a mistake. If you try to cover up, it's going to get worse and worse. And also, there's absolutely nothing wrong in saying, I don't know. And that also ends all of the snide remarks, the conversations. I mean, someone can say, oh, what a dumb person, but at least you're in the clear. And I think it's really important to think about protecting yourself, and especially in today's world because it's much worse.
I think you have to sometimes assert yourself, and not in an offensive way, but you sometimes need to remind others that you could have a voice that could be heard, that you should be at the table when the conversations and decisions are being made. And I think the best way to do it is baffle them with brilliance and be better at the other guy.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I wouldn't say necessarily that I have felt like there are certainly issues specific to being a woman and having had 3 kids in the workplace and said, I've taken 6 months off with each one, that makes me different. But so much of that has changed now because now the men I work with take 6 months off. So a lot of that has evolved over time. But that question about sort of being at the table, was it about communications as a function being at the table, or was it about being run by a woman that was at the table? So I think that's always something that, again, that's evolved. Now communications and marketing are expected to be at the table, whether it's run by a man or a woman. But I don't know, maybe I just have that loud voice. That,
Well,
yeah.
and part of it is industry-driven.
Industry,
I
right.
work with clients in the golf industry. Only 20% of the golfing population is female. So you're at a numeric disadvantage there. Similarly, in real estate,
Right.
the brokers, the managers, the owners tend to be men. That's changing.
Yeah.
It's shifted quite a bit.
And I've worked in fields that have been, banking is primarily a female field, as is philanthropy. So
Yeah.
that's, that could be a factor in that
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Interesting
question.
enough,
Yeah.
if you do work with men and in a lot of jobs, Washington State University has been where I've been working, and is pretty title-driven. So a woman who's walking in as executive vice president for such and such requires and is allowed, that particular responsibility, or that pedestal, and rightfully so. I worked at the News Bureau under University Relations, so that's when everybody, including students, trip, something goes amiss. We can write our good stories, but we have to be ready for somebody else's maybe fault. We still have the responsibility of being careful because we can do that incorrectly, some of that judgment call. And you will always know about the ones that don't work out. But I've noticed that I can surprise more people either in the classroom or on the phone when at 2:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from our local radio station or the most local newspaper and saying, I just heard that a student fell off a roof. So, first of all, I could, which I could say, I'm sorry, we'll probably be able to get some information for you tomorrow. This is Saturday night, so I'm not sure what we'll be able to do for you, but let me call you back. Okay, that happens a great deal in the field of public information. I'm going to blame it on public relations, because we didn't have PR here when I went through school. But what they get from me is, and I will admit this on the phone at least once per person, is, God damn it, I'll find out and call you back. Well, you've told them two things. One, you have no idea that it went on, and you're just as angry as they are. You're more angry because you weren't told. That darn thing of, if somebody sticks their head in a hole at the vice president's level, the rest of us who've been digging out of that hole on other issues never get a chance to do our work. Well, I worked for the media too many years to know that they deserve the information quickly, well, now terribly quickly, and they deserve exactly what happens. Maybe not names yet, because that has to do with hospital policies, not public policies. But we can get it through the system and everybody happy if we just keep things moving right along.
Any other questions? No?
So what happened?
Can you give us an example of your favorite experience throughout your career? Just like a project you've worked on or something that you will always remember? Your favorites?
Mine was, we bought a condominium. The developer went broke. We bought it in October 1984, May 1987. There's $500 in our bank. The developer has vanished, and we get organized. And of course, I become the president. I read the documents. I discover, because of certain things that happen, that somebody is going to owe us some money for the vacant lots. We have 6 vacant, unfinished units. So 10 years later, we're in court. We win. Another company has some interest in this, and they paid $55,000 in taxes. And they say, if you pay us the $55,000 in taxes, we will go away. So some of us get together, we find $55,000, and we pay them off. We get the 6 properties. I organize a committee. We sell the 6 properties. 1 we kept for a manager. And, 35 years later or something, we're still there. I'm not on the board, but I still have it and I enjoy going. That was probably the most significant thing I've done.
Maybe I haven't done anything significant, but what I was trying to remember things, and funny things, when you work on a field at the university or in a university, you take pride in what you all are doing, have done. The letters that come in later, oh, guess what, I'm done, or the, hey, emails, fine, whatever, that you're hearing back from students that now are in grad school or now just taking a job on the East Coast. That to us is leaving the fold, really, and I totally agree with it. But I think that's been most of the joy. Professionally, public relations, you just are so relieved, or public information, as I rather call it, you're just relieved when everything is worked out for everybody involved, that the fairest has been. But I probably had my most fun. I had to write a story years ago. One of our botanists said, it is absolutely ridiculous to talk to plants. Ridiculous. So we put the story out because he did it at a major event, at an address, but you like to put out things that your faculty don't think is just warm and fuzzy, And it went all over the world, that story did. And because people were, at that time, as maybe just overdoing the little containers with a little flower in them in your house. I mean, you have a few, but this was just riotous times of that style. And went all over the country, got clips from everywhere, just based on
Don't
a
talk to
bunch of hooey, And we got to write the hooey instead of trying to block it the other way.
That's right.
I talk to my plants.
Apparently don't need to. I work in philanthropy. I work in an organization called Seattle Foundation, which manages philanthropy for families and businesses in Seattle. And we also have a mission to ignite and foster philanthropy throughout our community. And about 7 years ago, we started an event called Give Big, which is a day-long online giving event. So we have nonprofits who register with us, and we say to Seattle that day, everybody go to our website, find your favorite nonprofit, and give money and donate to them. And then we would amplify the gifts by making them a little larger. So for every $100 you gave, we would kick in another 15 or so. So this event went on swimmingly for 5 years. We had great media sponsors. The Seattle Sounders FC are a partner. It was just great, super feel good, really raised the brand awareness and visibility of Seattle Foundation. So I was really proud and we would raise, $20 million in a day. So it was a very successful event for the nonprofits in the community that we served. So I was very proud of that because I sort of gave birth to that. And then last year we had a technology failure. And our technology was, we were one of 43 communities who were using the same platform on the same day. And there was, due to human error in one guy's programming maneuvers that weren't tested, the system failed. And so you have 1,600 nonprofit organizations in Seattle, Greater King County, all going, it's not working. And you have 50,000 donors who are saying it's not working. So that took what had been something that I was incredibly proud of having done and sort of turned it into the worst 48 hours of my professional career, and a potential crisis communications case study for any student looking to do one. But I think we persevered, we came out, we took our one-day event, we made it into 2 days. Our partners stood up for us, and we made it all work. So I think that even though that's something I will always be really proud of, the 5 years that were good, I'm also super proud of our team for the 1 year that it was bad. And crisis reveals character, and it revealed the character of the people that I worked with and the community partners we had and how we got through it. We're doing it again this year on May 10th, and I've got my fingers crossed. I'm going to Mass every week and saying, please let this all go well. But I think that's something that I will always be proud of, both the good part and the bad part, and something that also made a really meaningful impact in my community. So I feel proud of the foundation team for doing that.
Oh, there's so many memories, and I think probably the ones that are most indelible are the ways I've been able to use the skills I learned here at Washington State University in communications for some of the philanthropic and nonprofit and pro bono things that I do. I get to work on a concert to raise money for music education for kids. I don't get paid for it as such. There's, it's kind of complicated, but just to see the joy on kids' faces who otherwise would not have access to a piano lesson or things like that. And it's, and I look back and I thought, I learned how to do that when I was at Washington State University. I learned how to write news releases and talk to reporters and all this other kind of thing. And those are gifts that will last you forever.
All right, thank you guys so much.